My name is Michelle Zauner, and I'm the author of Crying in H-Mart and the front person of Japanese Breakfast. I was born in Seoul, Korea, and I grew up in Eugene, Oregon. Very different populations, very different vibes. I had a very privileged upbringing where I got to visit Seoul every other summer with my mom for 6 weeks. Growing up in Eugene, Oregon, largely Caucasian population, I especially grew up in the woods, sort of outside of town. So I was an only child and I had no neighboring children. I couldn't walk to a convenience store or a park. So I was kind of isolated in the woods. It was very different from getting to travel and visit my mother's family in Seoul, which was a super urban city. Even just being able to walk to a convenience store from my grandmother's apartment was really exciting for me. My mother was very beautiful, somewhat vain, very critical, very blunt, could be very private, very withholding. She was just a complicated, intricate person that I spent a lot of time with. She was a homemaker and I was an only child, and so we were really bonded very early on. Food was a big part of the way that my mother expressed her love. She had a very tough love. The way that she expressed her affection was really rooted in actions, remembering the kinds of food that you liked and the kinds of foods that you didn't like and what you would want after a long day and what brought you comfort if you were visiting home after a long time of being away. And I don't think I realized that until I was a little bit older. And a lot of what my book Crying in H-Mart is about is sort of discovering this particular type of love that was maybe a little more difficult for me to decipher because of our cultural differences and upbringing. H-Mart is a Korean grocery chain. It's typically in neighborhoods with larger Asian populations. My classic meal when I came home from college was she would marinate Korean short rib, kalbi, and she would buy all these various banchan, the side dishes and certain types of kimchi, and make sure that they were fermented enough just to my liking. She was great at making jigaes, which are Korean stews. We really ate in sort of accordance to the seasons and certain events. If it was one of those days where the summer was just starting, we'd bring the campfire grill outside and always roast pork belly. If it was raining, a lot of the times we had sujibi, which is a hand-pulled dump, a noodle soup, or miyeokguk on your birthday, which is a seaweed soup that mothers going through postpartum typically eat to sort of restore their nutrients, and is what you eat on your birthday to celebrate them. I feel like food was always about chasing cravings and events. I think it was 2014 in April, and I was playing in a kind of emo punk band called Little Big League that was not very successful, despite how badly I wanted it to be. And our bass player had just quit, and he had kind of been the Mick Fleetwood of the group. He was literally the glue of our unit. And I think I was in this place in my life where I was already starting to question, I need sort of a backup plan. So I had gone up to New York from Philadelphia to meet with my friend Duncan, who was editor-in-chief of the Fader magazine at the time, to see if I could get a part-time job. This is definitely not going to make the cut, but this is the story. And I knew, 2 years before, my aunt, my mom's younger sister, and me had passed away from cancer. On the way up in the bus, she was kind of being sort of elusive, which was sort of rare for her. And I kept asking her, how did your doctor's appointment go? Because she went in for a stomach ache and she wasn't really responding. And so finally I kind of put my foot down. I was I need to know what's going on. And she told me that she had stage 4 cancer. And it was right before my friend had come up, and I had to sort of go through this day where I had to pretend nothing had happened. It just felt like lightning sort of striking twice, because my aunt had just died of the same sort of illness, and I understood its gravity very well, and that my life was about to change tremendously, because especially being an only daughter and knowing how serious this diagnosis was, I knew I had to kind of take everything on my desk, completely clear it, go home and be with her from beginning to end. It's hard to remember exactly how I coped during that time. I had a lot of plans and ideas that were immediately sort of dispelled. My parents didn't really originally want me to come, particularly my mom, because I was 25 years old and it was a very important time in my life to sort of get my footing in the professional world. You know, she felt like her and my dad could handle it, and I think she partially didn't want to be a burden, but also she was afraid that we would fight because we had sort of this very tumultuous teenage years. She knew that she had to focus on getting better, and so it was sort of heartbreaking because my mom didn't want me to be there because she didn't think I was going to be helpful largely. And so while I was there, it was so essential for me to kind of prove my worth as a caretaker and just find a way to be this perfect, understanding, endlessly patient daughter that could help bring her to recovery. I think that my mom and I's relationship had begun to change after I went to college. I mean, we were sort of really at odds with one another in high school, like many mothers and daughters are. I think I particularly had a very strong independent streak, and I was really interested in pursuing music. And, you know, like any parent, I don't think my mom was too confident in her kid saying that she wanted to be a rock star for a living. And so we fought a lot, and it wasn't until I moved away for college when I was 18 that when I came back on breaks, we sort of began to see each other. Not only me as seeing her, not just as my mother, but as a person, as a human being. I think that sort of starts to happen for a lot of people in their early 20s. She once said to me, you know, I've just never met someone like you. And I talk about that in the book and how startling that was and how meaningful it was for me that it was sort of the closest way that she'd ever gotten to sort of apologizing or meeting me sort of in the middle, where I think she finally started to see me for who I was instead of trying to shape me into what she wanted me to be. But I think over the course of the 6 months that I lived in Eugene and lived there as a caretaker, I do think I sort of proved myself to her that I really loved her and I really, that I was a good daughter. I don't think I thought much about her impending death as a part of losing my culture until, after it happened. I think I probably realized that, once I went to a Korean grocery store and I realized I couldn't just call my mom anymore to ask her what brand of seaweed we used to buy or what kind of doenjang soybean paste we had at home. And that kind of set off some real neurosis that I didn't anticipate, of just when I have children, are we even gonna go to Korea anymore? If I go visit her sister, is that even allowed? Am I even welcome back there now that she's gone? Suddenly, this part of myself that always felt like an intrinsic part of who I was as a person suddenly felt threatened. The first line of Crying in H-Mart is, "Ever since my mom died, I cry in H-Mart." And I think I knew pretty early on that was going to be the first line of the book because, from my creative writing college course days, you were sort of taught that the first sentence should tell you everything you need to know about the story, that nothing is sort of hidden or revealed. And so it had a real thrust to it, I think. And it was also sort of simultaneously very sad and almost kind of funny. And I think in a way the book is very much about answering that question of why are you crying in a grocery store? There were a couple of reasons I decided to sit down and write a book that I knew was going to be very hard. The first was all of this happened very quickly. I moved back to Eugene, Oregon. I quit my job. I left all of my friends and my house and, this dream and passion of becoming a musician that I had pursued for the past 6 or 7 years, to move back to a small town I hated to help my mom through her illness. In 6 months, I suddenly found myself unemployed, married, without a mother, and soon enough estranged from my father. And everything I had known about my nuclear family and life as I knew it had been destroyed. And it was a real whirlwind. And I don't think I could quite wrap my head around everything that had happened until I started putting it down on paper to kind of really confront it. Because I think for a long time after something like that, you're just in shock. Another reason was, I was 25 and I couldn't relate to anyone. I couldn't relate to any of my peers about what had happened. And I didn't feel like anyone could fathom what I had seen. And I was very angry that sort of no one had warned me that this is what illness looks like, this is what death looks like, scientifically, physically, emotionally. And I just felt like I had to sort of scream it from the rooftop as a warning to people that this can happen and to be prepared. I had a really hard time remembering my mom before she was sick. And so I think part of writing this book was also about remembering things when they were good and preserving that for my lifetime. I think one of my favorite things that has come back to me about the book is children who have told me, I read your book and I called my mom, I hugged my mom, I took her out to lunch. I was just fighting with my mom and it made me see where she was coming from and realize how lucky I am to still have her. Because, I certainly had that sort of relationship with my mom and certainly not everyone is lucky enough to have a relationship with their mom that's tumultuous but rooted in a deep love and affection for one another. So yeah, I think that's my favorite piece. It's been really remarkable to see what has come back from putting this out into the world. My name is Michelle Zauner, and this is my brief but spectacular take on making the ordinary beautiful.